What's going on, everybody? Hopefully, you all enjoyed learning about the events leading up to the War of 1812 yesterday. Today, we are moving on to the events of the war itself, the War of 1812. Very creatively named because it begins in 1812, lasts until 1814. They probably could have come with a better name for this. American Revolution 2, Electric Boogaloo. That's what I would personally go with, but I do not name these wars, I just teach you about them. All right, let's take a look at the kind of early days of the war, what the perception was amongst Americans as this is all getting started. Now, as everything is beginning, Americans are very confident. They look at it and say, well, we've already beaten the British once, and also they are in the middle of a pretty large conflict with the French, fighting against this man by the name of Napoleon. You may have heard of him before. So the kind of thought process is they're not going to be able to fully focus on this conflict in America, so it should be fine. We should be able to win with no problem. However, there are some major issues as this is starting. During Jefferson's presidency, he had really kind of cut back on the military. He believed that during times of peace, there wasn't a need to have a large standing military. So at the time the war starts, the U.S. only has 16 warships and less than 7,000 total soldiers. Now, those numbers are not very large. It's not a very good thing. This puts the U.S. at a pretty sizable disadvantage as they're going into this conflict. One of the kind of biggest areas where they are definitely kind of the underdogs is the Navy. The British are going to set up what's known as a blockade at the beginning of the war along the coast of the United States. For those who don't know, a blockade is basically when you kind of line your ships up and you block all access to basically ports, cities. You're not allowing people or supplies to get into the country. So at this time, we have kind of very little in the way of supplies getting into America due to this naval blockade that's been set up by the British. There will be some successes for the Americans at sea. One very famous ship is the USS Constitution. It is going to take part in a naval battle with a British frigate in the North Atlantic. Now, this ship, the USS Constitution, you may know it better by the name Old Ironsides. During this battle, it is going to take on multiple shots, multiple cannonballs that will kind of repeatedly just bounce off the side of the ship as it stays afloat, leading to the American people naming it Old Ironside because it was as strong as iron. That's a pretty good name. That's better than some of the stuff we usually see when we're talking about these events. Now, a lot of the fighting is going to take place in the north, along the border of Canada, and that's because the Americans wanted to try to bring Canada in as part of the United States. They looked at it and said, hey, we used to be a British colony. We hated it. Why wouldn't the Canadians feel the same way? Unfortunately, that's not going to go very well for the Americans. Canada is going to prove to be very difficult to take over. There will be some key victories for the Americans in the North, but there's also a number of kind of pretty embarrassing defeats. One of those losses comes in the Battle of Detroit early on in the war. Now, in this battle, essentially, as the British Canadian soldiers approach, the Americans are going to kind of panic and retreat fairly quickly into the battle. It is pretty embarrassing. They end up losing the fort of Detroit. They will eventually take that fort back in the Battle of Lake Erie, where they're able to force the British back into Canada. They also have success in the Battle of Thames near Toronto. You may remember this is the battle where Tecumseh was defeated. You also have the Battle of Lake Champlain, where, again, you have Americans kind of forcing the British back into Canada, but largely, neither side really gains much ground in this fighting here. They more or less fight to a stalemate. Now, down in the southern states, we see a large amount of conflict between Native American tribes, specifically the Creek, who will lead a number of attacks against the American soldiers. Now, the American soldiers are largely being led by a man named Andrew Jackson, known as Old Hickory. He will, spoiler alert, so go ahead and cover those ears real quick if you don't want to know. He will go on to become president of the United States. Okay, that's the end of the spoilers there. I don't want to give away too much. But he will start to kind of make a name for himself during this fighting. During the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, he is able to defeat the Creeks, and ultimately they will sign a treaty known as the Treaty of Fort Jackson, where they will give up 23 million acres of land to the U.S. This is a big gain for the Americans. Now, in 1814, things will start to change a little bit with the war. This is when the British are finally able to defeat Napoleon and France, and at that time, they're able to shift their attention fully to the fighting in America. So this is a big deal. One of their first major targets is going to be Washington, D.C., the capital. They are going to basically march in, and the Americans are not ready for them. They kind of burn the city to the ground, one of their major targets being the White House. They are going to completely destroy the White House. If you want some more information about this event, the White House being burned down, make sure you go into the slides. There's a video linked right here. There's a lot of really good information on the burning of the White House. It's only about 7 minutes long, so it won't take all day for you to go and watch it. Now, while all this is happening, kind of very famously, the First Lady, Dolly Madison, wife of James Madison, is going to play a very key role. She has the idea to try to grab as many documents as she can. So she saves a number of very important documents from the White House. Along with that, she also, kind of on her way out, sees a painting of George Washington hanging on the wall. It's this painting right here. And before she leaves, she makes sure that they take down this painting and they bring it with them. Now, this painting still exists to this day, and it would not be here without the actions of First Lady Dolly Madison. Now, shortly after the burning of the White House in Washington, D.C., the British are going to move on to their next target, which is the city of Baltimore. Now, in this battle, the Americans are going to be better prepared. They're going to set up in Fort McHenry, which is right on the water in Baltimore. The British are going to bring their ships in, and they're going to open fire on the fort. And they're going to fire all night long. However, they are going to be unsuccessful in taking the American fort. Now, while all this is happening, a man by the name of Francis Scott Key is going to be watching the attack. And he is going to be absolutely shocked when morning comes along and that American flag flying outside of Fort McHenry is still standing. He is so inspired by this event and this flag that he writes a poem that he will title The Star-Spangled Banner. Now, some of you may have heard of this before, the Star-Spangled Banner. Hopefully most of you had. In 1931, this poem will eventually be named the national anthem of the United States. So every time you sing the Star-Spangled Banner, you sing this national anthem. I know you guys all love to sing. It's right up there with looking at old documents and obviously maps. So every time you are singing that national anthem, this is the flag you are singing about, the one here at Fort McHenry. It's pretty interesting stuff there. Now, eventually, the two sides, the American and the British, are more or less going to fight to a standstill. They're going to fight to a draw, a tie, and the two sides agree to a peace treaty. Now, this is going to be signed on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1814, in the city of Ghent, Belgium, hence the treaty being known as the Treaty of Ghent. You may remember from when we talked about the American Revolution, typically these types of treaties will be negotiated in kind of a third party, a neutral country. That way the delegates from both sides are safe. However, the fighting is taking place in America, the treaty is being negotiated in Europe, so word does not get back to the soldiers for a number of weeks that this treaty has been agreed to. So we are still going to see some more fighting. And we are going to see a huge battle in the city of New Orleans, however you want to say it. I know you guys have made fun of me before because some of you think I say the name of the city incorrectly. So there you go, both pronunciations. In January of 1815, this battle will take place. And this is going to be a huge victory for the United States. It actually kind of becomes the most famous battle of the war. It's very fitting that it happens after the war officially ends. But in this battle, you are going to see the Americans absolutely annihilate the British. You have over 2,400 British casualties, so that's killed and wounded, compared to less than 100, only 62 U.S. casualties. That is a large discrepancy. Now, this battle is important for a number of reasons. During this battle, you're going to see a number of different people kind of coming together and fighting back against the British. You have pirates frontiersmen living out kind of on the border. You have obviously the U.S. troops involved, and they are being led by Andrew Jackson, the general in this battle. And this victory here kind of catapults him into stardom. He becomes a national hero, a celebrity, a household name. Eventually, he will really be able to ride his military success straight to the White House. Now, ultimately, this also ensures that the treaty will be ratified, kind of officially signed off on. Once the British see this huge defeat here, they are 100% certain they do not want to fight anymore. They don't really have that much to gain here. They want this to just end as fast as possible. All right, guys, hopefully you learned something about the war here. If you have any questions, go ahead on Google Classroom and post them in the comments below. You all have a wonderful day. Stay out of trouble, make smart choices, and don't do anything that I wouldn't do.